Does God exist? I mean, it's a question that has been around forever, right? Today, we're going to look at it from a totally different angle, through the eyes of the philosopher J. Krishnamurti. You see, when he was asked this very question, he didn't just answer it, he turned it completely upside down. Let's dive in. It all starts with this, a really blunt demand from somebody in his audience. No philosophy, no nuance, just give me a straight answer, yes or no. But this simple question is actually the spark for a much, much deeper look into what belief is all about. So you'd expect a simple yes or no, but that's not what happens. Instead, Krishnamurti completely flips the script. He doesn't just answer the question. He actually challenges the person who's asking it and, well, the very foundation of the question itself. And this right here, this is the pivot. This is where everything changes. The whole investigation shifts from trying to prove or disprove a divine creator to exploring a much more personal and maybe even a more unsettling idea. What if we created God? Krishnamurti's logic here is pretty straightforward. He says, look, if a perfect, all-knowing, eternal God made us in his image, then we should reflect those qualities, right? We'd be joyful, loving, eternal. But just take a look at our daily lives. They're often filled with suffering, confusion, and anxiety. That's a pretty major contradiction. So when you're faced with this huge gap between the idea of a perfect creator and our own imperfect lives, Krishnamurti suggests a totally different conclusion, that the whole concept of God is actually an invention of the human mind. And listen, this isn't just some abstract theory for him. He points to the real world. He was apparently told that in India alone, people have invented over 300,000 gods. Think about that. Different localities, sometimes even different villages, all creating their own specific deity. So why? Why do we do this? What's the deep down motive? Well, according to Krishnamurti, it all boils down to one incredibly powerful emotion: fear. In a world that's confusing and, let's be honest, often pretty scary, we invent a god because we crave that feeling of security, that sense that someone, somewhere, is looking out for us. And this brings us to what Krishnamurti sees as this really profound irony. It's this strange circular loop that we get caught in when it comes to the act of worship itself. He breaks it down into this simple three-step cycle. First, our own thoughts project an image of what we desperately need, security, justice, love. Second, we slap a name on that projection, God. And finally, we end up on our knees worshiping the very image that our own minds created. So from this perspective, the act of worshiping God is really just worshiping a projection of our own wants and fears. It's a form of self-worship, just disguised as devotion to something bigger than us. Okay, so this leads us to the next really critical part of the whole investigation. If God is an invention, then what about the act of believing in God? What's the real value of belief when it comes to finding what's actually true? Now this is a really challenging statement. Krishnamurti is basically arguing that belief is actually an obstacle to finding truth. Truth, he says, is something you have to discover and live for yourself, not just something you accept because it's a comforting idea. And he poses this question directly, not just to the person in the audience, but to every single one of us. What practical difference does your belief system actually make in your day-to-day life? Does it fundamentally change anything? I mean, this really highlights the disconnect he's talking about. You can believe you have an eternal soul, but the daily reality for so many of us is still misery, or confusion, or loneliness. So he asks, what good is the belief if it doesn't actually solve our real daily suffering? So, if putting our faith in external gods or beliefs isn't the answer, then what is? This brings us to a really powerful metaphor Krishnamurti uses to describe our situation, and maybe a way forward. First, he really pushes back on our tendency to look for leaders, gurus, saviors, authorities, to tell us how to live. He argues this kind of dependence doesn't make us stronger. It actually makes us weaker. In the end, it's your life to live, not theirs. And here's the metaphor he uses. Just imagine this. Your life is a vast, wild jungle, and you are in it right now. And in this jungle, there are no maps. There are no guides. There are no saviors coming to show you the way out. You are completely and totally on your own.
Now, that might sound terrifying, but for Krishnamurti, it's the absolute opposite. It's the very definition of freedom. The moment you truly realize that you are entirely responsible for yourself, that's the moment you find this incredible vitality and strength to walk your own path.
He also gives this warning about getting stuck on words. We can talk about God or eternity all day long, but the word is not the thing itself, right? The word water will never quench your thirst. We get satisfied with the word when what we should be looking for is the reality behind it.
And so we don't end with an answer. We end with the exact question that Krishnamurti's entire philosophy leaves us with. If you accept this, that you are entirely responsible, that you are walking alone in the jungle of your own life, then what do you do? What's your next step? That is the real question.